We talked about the open season on coordinators in the NFL. A lot of guys out of jobs. A lot of coordinators out there that are out of work now. Greg Roman, we mentioned earlier, Mr. $3.5 million a year from the Baltimore Ravens. He's out after a 4-year run in Baltimore. And now apparently the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have identified their issues after they put together a bag of crap for a season, even though they won the division there in the crummy NFC South. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Byron Leftwich is gone. This was speculated. It had been speculated for a few weeks now that Byron Leftwich could be in trouble, and now he is out as offensive coordinator. They also clipped their wide receivers coach, their quality control coach. Like there's a slew of casualties from the offensive side of the football for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So now I don't know if that helps.
What's the list? Do you have the list of names?
Yeah, it's Chris Boniol, who's the specialist coach. Kevin Garver.
Chris Bonio or
Boniol.
All right.
Kevin Garver, who's the wide receivers coach, and then Jeff Castle, who's the offensive quality control coach. It's an entire list. It's a lot.
It's even longer than that.
Quarterbacks.
Yeah,
coach,
I mean Clyde Christensen, who was the quarterback's coach, he's retiring. He's coached for like 40-some years. Really good dude. He's probably would have been gone with that group too. But yeah.
Yeah, so all those guys are gone. So I don't know. Maybe this is, they're going to try and sell Tom Brady on a bunch of wholesale changes, and maybe he'll want to come back to Tampa Bay. Who knows? Maybe this was all how this played out. But there's been sort of this, this thing thrown out there that, Byron Leftwich is the scapegoat, that he's the guy who's going to get the blame. I don't know who's surprised by this. Like, this has been speculated for a little while now. Apparently, him and Brady maybe didn't have the greatest relationship in the world, and their offense wasn't very good this year. They didn't run the ball, and Tom Brady was throwing the ball over 730 times this season. Like, yeah, they had some injuries, but I don't think this is the most surprising thing in the world that Leftwich ended up, getting canned, and all these other guys on the staff also did. I just wonder if this helps make the case for Tom Brady to return to Tampa Bay. That's where my big question is.
I mean, they're probably trying to make a move to do so. And I think as you look at the landscape, we talked about this before, like all the hype and where I fell victim to, at least from betting standards, thinking that like the Bucs could make a run because look at Tom Brady in the postseason. He's 35-12, 35-13 now. But compared to everyone else, like Dak was 1-3, he's now 2-3. Kirk Cousins was 1-3 coming into it in his career. Now he's 1-4. Like, you start going through the quarterback records and how much experience they have and how they've performed in those moments. And in some cases, by the way, the quarterbacks perform fine. It's just that, the team hasn't. But there's a lot of inexperience. And you kind of look at it and go, all right, like Tom Brady should be able to navigate his way through this if they can play some close, tight games. That game wasn't even close versus Dallas. That's the problem. I mean, this team was so far removed from what it was a couple of years ago when it won a Super Bowl. I mean, it was just night and day. And so, they make drastic changes on the coaching staff. I feel like there's also, maybe some areas in the roster they're going to have to make some drastic changes if they want to try to compete for a Super Bowl. But as you look around the landscape of where Tom Brady could go and where he'd be able to compete, I mean, you guys tell me, like, is the NFC still not the easier path?
Yes.
I feel like maybe that's their selling point to Tom. Like, hey, look, you've won one here already. You know where we'll pull out all the stops to do it. You didn't have a great relationship with Byron, or things weren't working well offensively. We moved on. Let's go find you one of the best guys out there to help, bring you to the top of your game, and let's go continue to build on this roster. If that's the case, I mean, it might be in his best interest to hang around for another year and stay in Tampa.
Man, they won the NFC South. Almost made it to the Super Bowl the year before. Win the Super Bowl the year before that. It's like kind of like you want to talk about milk going bad when it goes bad. I mean, these people lost their job. It's not funny. But it's comical to think that when you look at the standards of which people's jobs that they're doing and how they're measured and how they're weighed, it has to be based off of the results, I would assume. And so when you look at the results, I mean, all right, so you had a failure of a year. You limped into the playoffs, but yet you won your division. Like, here's what I'm curious, and obviously it takes time to see how this plays out, but I just wonder what their success level is moving forward, because they were competitive before Tom Brady got there, and before Bruce Arians got there. They were competitive, but they weren't really competitive. They weren't like really good, like a perennial playoff team. It was New Orleans that was dominating, and Atlanta was the other team that was dominating the South. And so now you make these moves. It's almost like wholesale moves, at least on the offense side of the ball. I mean, they did get rid of a outside linebackers coach or whatever and on that list, but it just makes me wonder if this was a failure, then you guys truly have changed the dynamic and the measurement of what success is in Tampa Bay. If your standard is not winning the NFC, or you have to win the NFC South, and what's next? You have to go where in the playoffs for it to be a successful season? Because if I recall, we're having conversations. There's a lot of conversation that took place where if Mike McCarthy loses in the first round, if Brandon Staley loses in the first round, they're out of there. Well, did the Chargers win the AFC West?
No.
Did Dallas win the NFC East? Like, I just, it's kind of strange. It's kind of, whether it's warranted or not, that is what it is. But I just think that it's kind of strange on where it's time for people to move on and get let go versus those that don't, and they stay based off of what? What are we basing that off
I think the alarming thing for Tampa is they had losses this year in which they weren't even competitive. Like what happened in San Francisco. That game wasn't competitive. That game on Monday night against Dallas, at no point, and we talked about it.
Well, they did take their guys
At
out.
no point did anybody think, yeah, Tampa's got a shot in this game? Like, it was pretty clear early on, even though Brett Maher was missing extra points, that Tampa had no chance.
No chance. It was never in the game.
And so
they were never in that game.
I think that was really just an indictment with where they were. And
the kickoff.
I also think moving forward, they look at it and they go, the window's closing if it hasn't already. We got veteran guys. Mike Evans is going into his 30s, and they're probably looking around going, if we can get a little bit healthy next year, and Tom Brady's looking around and Brady mentioned the path to get to the postseason, there's no better path to get to the playoffs, I would argue, in the NFL than the NFC South, because Carolina's in a rebuild. They don't even have a coach. They don't know what they're doing at quarterback. Atlanta, who the hell knows what their direction that team is going in? And New Orleans feels like they're at a spot to where they're also looking for a quarterback. So if you're looking around the NFL and you're thinking, how can I get back to the postseason? And then once you get to the postseason, you roll the dice, hope you're a little bit healthier, and hope we have some changes. To me, it's Tampa Bay makes all the sense in the world. The Raiders are juicy. The Dolphins are fun because it'll piss people off and all that stuff. And some of the other teams have been throwing that. The Niners, which feels unrealistic with Brock Purdy. I just think this makes the most sense. If I'm Brady and I'm looking for the path to get back to the postseason, no place makes more sense in Tampa Bay.